Morning, everyone. This is Fred Talks number 5, and today's topic is going to be diving a little deeper into. Did I scare you? Is anyone watching this besides me? The three wise men: the partner, the summoner, and Obama. Okay. By the way, two of those three guys are really nasty and evil and should be avoided. So today's topic is going to continue my last discussion about what the curriculum is really about now. And there has been a shift, and the emphasis is on a different syllable. We need to understand that the big ask in the new curriculum, is that you emphasize with your students more about the skills, the doing, and less about the content and you imparting that content to them. The content's always going to be important. It's what is still the backbone, really, of the process, but the emphasis has shifted to process. And a lot of people don't want to hear that because, as a veteran teacher, when I got into teaching, I was, well prepared to, take all the stuff I had learned and impart that to kids. And you just can't teach them everything. And obviously content is still important. It's going to be tested. It's going to be evaluated, peer assessed, peer reviewed, self-assessed. But it's really about how kids learn to learn, how they can research, evaluate, prioritize the Bloom's taxonomy, which I'm going to get into on another video down the road when I take a look at critical thinking, the provincial assessments, and how we should all be teaching critical thinking, not just the core academic courses. And that's why theoretically we're all supposed to just plunk the kids down in front of the provincial assessments, and they should do well on them, or better than they are. Anyway, let's start by taking a look at a couple documents which I have shared with you already. So I'm going to go and share my screen with you. Hey, Rusty, how are you? It's my dog, Rusty. Okay, so the document I've shared with you already, a framework for classroom assessment, which I'm sure most of you haven't had the time to read because you're super busy. And so, I consider it my job to try and lead you through some of this new emphasis. So the table of contents is here, and I'm going to walk you through this so that we can see what the new emphasis is about. First of all, in the background and overview, they kind of talk about how the change came about. But one thing, these two big shifts in the curriculum right here. Competency-driven curriculum, instruction, and assessment are refocused on doing. And then in that doing process, throughout K-12, student progress in relation to the learning standards will be documented mainly by classroom teachers through formative assessment. So gathering evidence, the portfolio structure, giving descriptive feedback, not just numbers, not just quizzes and tests. Of course, we're always going to have to generate a mark, and I will discuss that in the next video. So this is a big change, and it's probably the main thing we need to think about. Again, a quick overview of what a typical curriculum page would look like. The big ideas, the curricular competency, the doing, the skills, and the content, where you are going to tap into to see the kids do the processes that are required and requested through the curricular competency. So it looks a lot like this. You have the curricular competencies at the top, and then our classroom task is to create criteria categories for different skills that we're asking the kids to develop and learn through the content. So this can be done by yourself. It can be co-created, as I'll show you in my next video, or it can be something that's already been designed. And this is one of the big sort of challenges for teachers, is designing criteria and rubrics that are going to be effective and simple for students to use. And one thing I find complicating in this process is that some of these rubrics that I find and I look at are simply too detailed. And that's just my reflection on it. I want a far simpler process, and that's why I really enjoy the single point rubric. And I think you would too if you start to design some tasks around that. But there are different applications of the criteria, observations. There's the rubric, reflection, and this is the self-assessment stuff. Design specifications, that's where you, I think, create more of a specific, I want to see this in this assignment. Interview conference guidelines, you might chat with the students, and I'm seeing more of this around the school. And teacher and peer feedback, have other people join the feedback loop to the student and create that evidence and that immediate feedback to students so that they know where they're at. Did they get the task right? And are they moving forward? Now, how does this look? Well, there are some other more detailed things about the learning standards, about the key things in this framework, but the process really does come down to tying the curricular competencies to specific criteria categories. And this has already been developed at the provincial level in terms of learning standards. And a lot of teachers know about that already. And unfortunately, right now, they go K to 9, and English and French and other departments have seen those and are using them. And the criteria there is developed, and there's some useful handouts in that process. This is kind of an overview of criteria categories for science, English language, social studies, and math, the core subjects. And this graphic is a good one that really represents a lot of the higher level thinking in the Bloom's taxonomy that we should be focusing on to encourage critical thinking. Again, criteria developing here, and these are examples in the science curriculum up to grade 8, questioning, procedures and evidence, analysis, ethics, communicating, and there are going to be updated ones for the senior grades coming. Again, how do you apply these in your classroom? And then these are some sample applications from the lower grades. So a bit more of a thought process involved, a bit more of a descriptive feedback process involved. And I think in relation to my blueprint again, in the K to 9 level, students are loading their self-assessment and their reflection into their all about me. And at the grade 10 level, that becomes my blueprint. And of course, here's what's really driving a lot of this discussion is the proficiency scale, which is encouraged at all levels now, so that students understand the skill that they're expected to learn to do, and then are given feedback based on this standard. Emerging is they're not very good, basically. Developing is it's encouraging, more of a C mark. Proficient is they're good at it, but not great. I would say a B. And then extending is where they kind of nail all the requirements in the criteria or the rubric or the expectations, and they get a 4. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this before this video is over, but I'm also going to dive into it a bit more in the next video about how these could work for you. There's a sample application for grade 4 social studies here about using the rubrics and the criteria. and the proficiency standards. So the criteria category is here: analysis, evidence and interpretation, ethics and decision making, and the rubric has been built here. And again, I find this cluttered. I'm not necessarily encouraging you to do this. And as I'll show you in the next video, I try to keep it as simple as possible for my students, both when I co-create criteria with them or when I just tell them what I expect from the assignment. And maybe it's a little easier at our level, at the senior level. I'm not sure. I've never taught elementary school. Here's a sample application to grade 6 mathematics. And this involves an interview with a student and some other criteria that's developed around that idea that you're going to talk with your student about some of these learning processes, how they're feeling about their learning. This is a reflection on First Nations, First Peoples worldviews and mathematical concepts. And here's a sample application for grade 9 science. The criteria category down the side, the case study assessment here, and the results. Can the kid do these things in the criteria? Kind of a checklist, but I think in many ways, as always, the easiest way and the best way forward for all teachers is to develop your own system using the basic framework of kids doing more, research skills, applications, analysis, self-assessment, and creating effective criteria so that they can attain and be further ahead than when they entered your class. Now, one of the key things in this process is this graphic here. This is a draft proficiency scale, which has now become the norm. This is what is, for a lot of the doing, this is what people want you to develop with your students. Is the student emerging, developing, proficient, or extending? And then I've penciled in the mark that I use to explain to kids if they've achieved the extending or the proficient, the developing or the emerging, and why. You can also translate these marks into letter grades here. Because let's face it, we know the A student in our class. We know the C student. It's easy to tell from evidence, basically, whether it's tests or whether it's assignments, projects handed in, regular classroom work. And I have shifted in both my senior classes that I'm teaching this year and last year to this 4-point scale. And I explain it to students. And they know the jargon. They have been taught this at the lower grades. It's just like they know the core competencies because they've been taught it at the lower grades. And unfortunately, we're the last people to this party. And so we're behind the curve, I would say, at this point in terms of implementing some of these assessments. Okay, I'm going to wrap it for this video. If you have any questions or comments, please email me back, and we'll continue next day or in the next video looking at this kind of process where you could take a mark and you can transfer it to the BC performance standards. We know that kids who are in the A category are generally exceeding expectations. If you're an A in my class, you've done everything to my satisfaction and to the requirements of the course. And it's a lot of doing. It's content related, and there are still exams, but there are far fewer of them. And you see how this is the Yukon, which is also a really good site online. They tie their curriculum to the BC curriculum, and so there's a lot of interconnectedness. Anyway, let's chat in the next video about examples of how to implement um, some proficiency standards and some criteria building and interpreting the curriculum from the curricular competencies through the content into an actual process of kids doing, learning, evaluating, sharing, and that process. Thanks.